that's not uncommon for people with MRKH to prove their worth through a lot of sex. It had nothing to do with the person, and I'm so sorry to every sexual partner out there that I've had, which has been a lot. It was almost like a numbers game. The more I could sleep with people, the more a woman I thought I might feel.
Ally Hensley, Ally, welcome to No Filter.
Thank you so much for having me.
And how lucky that this is No Filter, because I'm going to give our listeners the same. Is it a warning? It's a premonition that you have given readers in your brilliant book, Vagina Uncensored, a memoir of missing parts. And this is the warning. We're going to say vagina a lot.
Yeah, we are. It's a staple to my vocabulary diet.
The irony of us saying vagina a lot is that you were born without a vagina.
I most certainly was, yeah.
And this is, I'm going to cast myself in the same role as the friend that you refer to in the book who has all the standard questions that I imagine a lot of our listeners also do. And it actually comes from, I realise, a place of privilege of never having to question that about my body. Question one, how did you wee?
Well, so the diagnosis, just to sort of premise this conversation, is called Mayer-Rokitansky-Kauster-Hauser syndrome, MRKH for short, the most unsexiest diagnosis name to advocate for. Not that I believe it's all about being a glamorous brand, but it is a hard one to take over the line. It's a congenital condition, meaning it was present at birth and it affects 1 in 5,000 women. It tends to occur in the first 6 to 8 weeks of gestation. So when all those vital organs are being formed and developed, I always describe it as a lorry traveling down the genetic path and it hits a pothole. And in that pothole was the reproductive development. So I was born with ovaries, which meant my estrogen was firing. So I'm an XX chromosome, female biologically. And because I had the estrogen, it was giving my body the signal to develop typically externally as a female. So you'd never know from the outside, which is why it wasn't picked up at birth. The way it was diagnosed is when I failed to get my first period. So I have the urethra. It was the actual vaginal canal. And because we're formed from the outside in, my genitalia was, I don't like to use the word normal, Kate. It's got me into a lot of sad times.
I understand. Standard? Yeah. What term do we use? Standard?
I use typical.
Right, typical. Okay. So you're externally, as you were saying, you're typical. So if anyone saw you naked, nobody would know that what is missing is the internal cavity.
So yes, I was born without a uterus, the cervix, and then the vaginal canal. What I was born with is called a dimple, which is like, basically it was the length of my thumbnail. The first sign was no period at 16. I went to the doctors with my mum. They said, maybe you're a late starter. I wasn't overly athletic. I'd sort of dabbled in eating disorder, but I wasn't so thin that the period would stop or not start. Because when you've released a book and you've told all your secrets,
which you have.
Yes, of course. Right. So I can't really backtrack on the truth as much as I used to politely give my sort of diagnosis pitch or speech, if you like. I was over in Greece with my family and my best friend, and we had this, I don't think I've ever actually shared this before. We had one of those like charts where you can kind of gauge who kisses the most boys or who gets chapped up,
right?
Who would take part in hand play, and then who would go the full mile and have sexual intercourse. And I met this really gorgeous guy in a bar, and it was like after closing, and I can't remember where I was. I think it was behind a bush somewhere probably. And we tried to have sexual intercourse and it just didn't work. And I didn't know then that I had MRKH. So, he gave it a good go, but it just never happened. And I thought it was like the hymen thing. When you're young
Right,
and you hear about the
yes.
hymen and you have to pop your cherry. I just thought maybe
Yes.
mine was not so poppable. So that's how I kind of knew something was wrong. But you never go as far to think that it could be this particular scenario.
No, because as you said, it's so rare.
Mm.
Did you, because you went to the doctor with your mum,
Mm-hmm.
so this was after the Greek holiday?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the Greek hottie then. Yeah, the Greek holiday. We came back and then the period hadn't arrived still. I remember doing my school exams and having this terrible fear that I would be the girl that sort of stands up after the 3-hour maths exam and has like blood all over her
Yes.
skirt. And I wore these really ugly sanitary towels that my mum gave me. They're ones that kind of like, they look like a hammock. They're really archaic now.
Oh, and they've got
I
an
wore one of those
elastic
for 3
clip
weeks.
on them or something. Right.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Huge
Yes.
compared to nowadays. But concerned at that point, the GP gave me an internal exam, which is incredibly intrusive. I mean, I was a child. You would think of 16-year-olds, of course, being very mature, but we're not far out of childhood. And he had a look on his face that was obviously quite concerning. He did refer me to have an ultrasound, and then the sonographer's face was also sort of perplexed. Then I went on to have a laparoscopy, which is they insert a camera into your abdomen.
Right.
And that was the diagnosis day. I remember the doctor pulling the curtain around my bed. He hadn't for any other of the patients on the ward. And he drew a diagram. And I always think it's funny, the facts that you remember, like a lead pencil. No one ever uses pencils now. And he told me that I was born with this diagnosis. But it didn't occur to me. My mum's face was profoundly grief-stricken, shocked. But I just thought, well, I'll get fixed. What's the big deal? And there lies trauma, when you don't truly believe or comprehend the news that's given to you. And shortly after, I was sent to a very, very amazing flagship hospital in London, where I was given 2 options if I wanted to create a vaginal canal. And this is only literally a month after my diagnosis. It all happened very fast. And they give you 2 options. Surgery, where they create one, obviously surgically, and there's about 5 different procedures. Some are barbaric, some are less awful. Or vaginal dilation, which is when they give you their various sizes of Pyrex tubes. They're not sexy dildo looking things. They literally are tubes. And I was admitted into hospital for 3 days and taught how to create a vagina. And you would be lying on your back, your knees splayed into a diamond shape. And the nurse would guide you with the smallest into the dimple, and you would press against your body. So I would have to use my strength of my arm and my hand against the resistance of the muscle mass, which is the undercreated vagina. And they said to me, if your knuckles turn white, you're doing it correctly. And I think despite nailing how to do it, those 3 days in hospital are incredibly, incredibly responsible for the next 15 years of how I completely dismantled and reacted to this diagnosis. I did create the vagina. It took me 9 months. It's a really weird scenario when you're upstairs in your bedroom before school, after school, parents are downstairs, trying to coexist with normality. Sometimes I would sneak some cider and some hooch to make myself a bit tipsy so I don't have to feel the pain.
Sure.
And the shame. I should say pain and shame. And even though I was going through the process, there wasn't any support, there wasn't any awareness. I always think it's really interesting when there are so many procedures out there where physiotherapists and gynaes and healthcare professionals will say, this is your diagnosis and this is your treatment. But there was something that I've only been able to really nail, I guess, in the last year about that process for me, because I was really learning how to couple pain with progress, pain and intimacy, and pain with shame and sex. And that's why I had a shockingly bad relationship with relationships and sex for a long time.
Well, what you've described sounds like a term that's bandied around a lot, but you've had a double dose of trauma then, because you had the physical trauma of actually trying to create this vaginal passage in what sounds like a most excruciating manner, but you've also had the emotional trauma. So even down to the fact that when you talk in your book about your family, who sounds so beautiful, your mum and your dad, and they were very open about this, but even the openness, like you said, brings shame. So everyone's like, oh, where's our Ally? Oh, she's upstairs making her vagina. You know what I mean? Like that's so difficult when you're that age, at any age.
Well, isn't it? And I think, this topic stems from women's health, I think, in general, when it's below the belt. And I think parents do their absolute best. I mean, I probably got away with quite a lot in the sense of just allow her to work it through or work it out, or let's not go too hard on her. Now, I would say to parents, place the boundaries that you would for any child, because it gives them a sense that you're still a, in quote, normal child. And they did their best. But I mean, my dad took me to the hospital when I first made the vagina or started the process because my mum was working. And oh gosh, he tried so hard to sort of normalize it for me. But you are right in the double dose. And I don't think that caught up with me for a very, very long time. One, pure denial. Two, there's no real space to talk about this, certainly with friends and because how do you sort of say, oh, you never guess what I had to do last night. I had to go and create my vagina. Woohoo, I've got one. And so you're living in a sense of constant secrecy, which of course we know breeds even more shame. And more than anything, I think when you're 16, 17, you're at this junction of womanhood, which sounds sort of very poetic now when I think about it. But you think, what kind of mother will I be? And what kind of partner will I be? And when those two things are thrown into disarray, pretty much overnight, what you believe womanhood to be is completely, thrown out the window. And I felt awful. I felt disgusting. I felt broken. I talk a lot in the book about, just the KY jelly that I had to use. Just I felt like it was always on me. Sort of having to, it's almost self-harm by consent. And I will definitely include a trigger warning here in terms of people who've gone through sexual assault. I can't claim that experience, and I would never dare to try to put myself in that camp, of course. But for me, when I think about the sort of the symptomatic processes and the afterthought of, as you sort of shame and the PTSD and the trauma, it felt like an assault on my body, but I did it to myself. I sort of say it's very sad. I feel very sad for my 17-year-old self and all the people who are going through this diagnosis.
You after your MRKH diagnosis, how did you share that with, for instance, your girlfriends from school who were menstruating and living, as you say, a typical womanly life and on the cusp of that? How did you kept it secret?
I think I told one friend, my best friend at the time. I would lie an awful lot. I lied about whether I had sort of like the tampon in the bag, what time of the month was I on, We talked about sort of later on contraception, where I would learn the most common names of contraception, like the pill, so that if I was asked, I could tell them or a prospective partner. It really just wasn't spoken about. And I don't think it was a conscious decision almost not to speak about it. It was, I refuse to even acknowledge that it exists, to not speak about it. And I think I left school, I dropped out of school. I was in an absolute car crash as I was leading up to my final exams. And then I let loose into the big unknown. I got into university. I don't know how. We call them A levels over here. And that was the worst place for somebody who doesn't want boundaries, doesn't know how to do boundaries, and pretty much I was on a self-destructive path to self-destruct. I hated myself, and I was going to do everything within my power to ensure that that was true. And I would put myself into situations where I would purposefully be treated incredibly poorly by people, by men. It was a real weird validation of, yes, you're right.
What you believed about yourself.
And again, I think this is to do with the vaginal dilation hospital experience. That's all I knew about intimacy. So I didn't know how to form healthy relationships with anyone really, in the sense I would gravitate towards people who had their own probably demons, if I look at it, retrospectively. The sort of like the bad boys, the bad people that wanted to act out, wanted to get pissed every night, wanted to have, random sexual encounters. The more the merrier, the worse the better. It was everything that was healthy. I chose to do the opposite. Was I choosing? I don't think I even know if it was a choice. I was just doing that with anyone and everyone. I didn't tell anyone.
It's very interesting because I met you through the pages of your book, and though you describe, the depths of your pain and fear and shame, within that, there's an overriding sense of you as being a very, actually, I'm going to say happy person, which is you address the notion of happiness, a very lovely person, a very easy to love person. And I'm struck by how it seems in retrospect sometimes we like to look at people as though they're fully finished now the way they always were. But your journey has been such an incredible one of grappling at each stage with the dysfunction, the physical, the mental, the self-harm, to get yourself to the place where you are now. And I think this is where your story is of benefit to so many people.
I actually want to cry when you're saying that to me, Kate, those lovely compliments. It's, I wrote the book, but I don't know what it's like to look at me from the outsider perspective, or of course the reader perspective. I was brought up to be a very hard worker with values and morals and empathy. I think when you've been through horror, they always say that you want to heal other people for the parts that are unhealed in yourself. I am I don't know whether it's the word resilience, I knew how to sort of present myself to be, as I say, a hard worker, a kind person. I would never want harm on anybody else. That wasn't my objective. My objective was to hurt myself and allow others to hurt me, as I say, through domestic violence, control, crazy choices in men that I'm still maybe trying to work out, let's say. I think we all are working in progress.
We all have those, vagina or no vagina, by the way.
I was going to say that doesn't make me special. And that's what's so important about the book. Thank you for that, because the book, of course, touches on MRKH and kind of sets the tone for my experience. But I think there are so many experiences we as women feel that whether you have MRKH or not, a vagina or not, there is infertility in there. There is like the dating dilemmas in Bondi Beach. Good Lord, like you have to seriously armor up to date in Bondi Beach when I lived there for 15 years. The turnaround moments, I think, I always knew deep inside of me that I knew that I could do something really good. And I knew that I wanted to really be happy. I think I was always on a conveyor belt observing happiness and trying to work out how people can feel like that and what do I have to do. It was when I was in Bondi, and I think I was tanked up on some wine actually, and Facebook was in my era. And I wrote a post on the MRKH forum saying, I really need help. And I was wondering if anyone knew how to help me. Of course, next day, hungover and over sharer's remorse, deleted the post. But that was probably the first step in knowing that I needed to kind of get up close and personal with my diagnosis. I was so exhausted of being so unhappy. And I did email an amazing hospital in Sydney, and I asked if a support group existed for people like me, knowing that London and Boston had spearheaded the way in peer support. And they said, we don't, but there's something in you, quite a good business acumen, organized, passionate. So we did. That's what we did. We started the first peer support group for people in Australia. And there was 15 women in a circle. There was a doctor and there was a nurse. And we, for 3 hours, did some presentations. We did small storytelling. I don't think peer support or healing is any particularly difficult formula. We've seen it happen through hundreds and hundreds of years of women coming in circle, or eating disorder therapy groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Bible study groups, book clubs. They all have the same formula. You create a safe space for people to talk about what's has caused them so much harm with no judgment, absolute trust and safety. And there you've got yourself a place for true recovery. I don't think that it's when people think about peer support, it's let's sit around and braid each other's hair and talk about, something that might have just hurt 10 years ago. There's a fully functioning, robust way to do what I did in Australia. And I have never felt anything come so effortlessly than I did knowing that I wanted to become an MRKH advocate. However, what I quickly realized in the world of media, especially in Australia, which is a young-ish, I guess, country, and no one's been talking about vaginas like 15 years ago the way that I wanted to. I realized that this isn't the time to fundraise. This isn't the time to be building programs for people with MRKH. This is the time to start talking about the condition as raw and as open as I possibly could without turning it into a clickbait exercise, because I know that it could be misconstrued a lot of the time as that, maybe.
You talk about wanting to create this place of safety, which once again, with the benefit of hindsight, was possibly as much for yourself as for the other women that you drew to you. But because in your personal life, you had lived without any safety. So your first relationship with James that was in the UK. Tell me about that period and where you were mentally and spiritually at that point.
With James?
Yeah. And then subsequently Tom and the period of your life that brought you to Australia.
I dropped out of university. They wanted to put me on antidepressants. I was self-harming quite a lot. I did attempt to take my own life one night at university, and I knew that I was dangerously close to the edge, or let's say the end. My dad came and picked me up, and we drove back to Berkshire, which is the county I was born in the UK. But I still wasn't ready. Like, I was still far from ready. I still had like a goal to continue the self-destruction. I just had a sabbatical for a couple of months. I walked into a pub because, you know, that's what you do midweek without any goal or purpose or friends or happiness. And I just met the locals. I was drinking cider at the end of the bar, and I heard that there was a job opening in a kitchen, and my mum had a restaurant, so I had a bit of experience in that environment. And I was half pissed, and I had an interview with James, and I got the job. And I went back down to the bar and I fell off the stool because I was that drunk, and everyone laughed. And that was pretty much the premise for the environment. It was very secret with James. I was still on a very promiscuous high. That's not uncommon for people with MRKH to prove their worth through a lot of sex. It had nothing to do with the person. And I'm so sorry to every sexual partner out there that I've had, which has been a lot. But I did. It was almost like a numbers game. The more I could sleep with people, the more a woman I thought I might feel.
At that point, sorry, Ally, at this point, because your vagina is functioning as a typical vagina at this point. And so you can have a promiscuous and vigorous sex life like any other girl in her 20s.
Yes, but I also never wanted to go back to dilation ever again. And there's different opinions about whether your vagina will close. I mean, it won't ever close up. It's like an elastic band over time. You have stretched it. But I just had this awful feeling that if it shrinks, then I'm going to have to go back to that bedroom scenario and push objects back into my body. So I thought, over my dead body, am I ever going to do that again? So I had a lot of sex in replacement of having to go through dilatory therapy.
Using a penis as the dilator.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, practical.
I thought it was, I thought I was being pretty resourceful. They were dilators with a heartbeat. And it sounds awful, but I don't think they cared about me any more than I cared about them. That was the environment that we were in. And it's only in the last few years where I've been sort of on-off relationships. And I thought, oh shit, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to go back to dilation. I don't want to go back to being like, you know, a promiscuous woman. I don't have the time nor the contacts to do it. But now I'm just taking sheer faith in the fact that I'll make the right choice when I have to make the right choice. But then James, none of us should be working in a pub. You should never give responsibility or keys or to anyone who's under the age of 25. It's a dangerous place. Too much drugs, too much money, honestly, too much exposure to alcohol. Everyone in the environment tends to be on the run from something. There's a trauma there. That's why hiding in pubs is so easy, because everyone's there for a reason and they don't want to talk about it. They want to escape it. I can't remember the first time that I saw James showing any, I can't remember our relationship ever being particularly happy, but I do remember the first time he hit me, and I didn't think that I needed to leave or question. And sadly, a lot of the people in the pub were exposed to our volatility. They knew of the domestic violence. Do people step forward? I don't know if that's their responsibility. But I normalized it because it was punishing me. And I just remember him, and as the book, line in the book says, when he was talking to a bunch of locals, he turned to me and said, is there any wonder that I don't want to have sex with that?
Yes.
And I never told James about my diagnosis.
But a friend did. One friend that you had shared it with told him?
Yes. Yes, out of spite. She was really angry with me, and she walked up to him and told him that, your girlfriend was born without a vagina and a womb. You're going out with a freak. And again, this is the sad thing about where I was in relationships. I never thought I should leave. And I begged him to, whenever he wanted to end the relationship because he knew it was so dysfunctional, I begged him to stay. And he did. And the violence just got worse and worse.
You ended up then setting yourself free to a certain extent, and you ended up in Australia where you became ours really for a period of time. You were in Bondi, kind of living the dream with another man called Tom.
My tone.
Yeah.
I didn't leave. I didn't go to Australia because I wanted to be set free. I went to Australia because I was on the run. And my mum was born in Sydney, and she left Australia in her early 20s because she was on the run from her past and her trauma. And I had citizenship, so it was no problem with me going. And we had this really shitty apartment in Elizabeth Bay. And I shouldn't say that because Elizabeth Bay is gorgeous in Sydney, if you know it. Of course it is. But I was working for this really bad tech company. I don't know what I was doing. I wasn't living the dream for, I want to say, a good number of years. We ended up moving to Bondi. I'm blessed, Tom, because we've reconnected since the book. So I want to be kind. I think it's always important to protect those in your book. But there was a certain amount of control there. I wasn't allowed to go out to the beach or in icebergs, the gorgeous pool. Only
With
after a
the
few years.
swimmers.
With the swimmers, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm not like, if I'm not very good at being like gorgeous and glamorous, but I felt very at home there. I felt like the water is so much. I have no water where I live in England, and doesn't it take a toll? But I had to be home before he woke up, and I would make sure that everything was in place for him waking up. Before we went to work in the city, I'd have to get his clothes ready. I'd have to make sure that if it was winter, I would have to heat the clothes on the heater so they were warm when he put them on. And if there wasn't the bus pass in his wallet, God forbid, when we got the 333, and that's the Bondi Rocket, the bus that goes in and out of Bondi. And he again ended it. And this is the tragic thing. Even though I knew these relationships weren't supposed to be, I still didn't want to be alone, and I didn't want to be rejected. And he did. And I was at a junction because I thought, well, I can either go back to the UK where my mum is, my dad is, that's my motherland. But I felt actually at home in Bondi. And I thought, this is it. This is the time where you've got to choose life or repeated crap. And I found a yoga studio, which we know they're beautifully in abundance of in Bondi. And it was this very cute.
You were doing Bikram, yeah?
I love Bikram. I wanted to be a Bikram teacher, actually. I think everyone wanted to be a Bikram teacher at one point. But I got really bad eczema through the heat because I was practicing so much, and I couldn't practice anymore. I would claw my legs till they were red raw. The Bikram, but I loved it. I used to learn all the 26 postures. I was learning the Pidgin English. I was saving up to go to one of the trainings. But yeah, that took hold, and I was like, oh my God, my yoga life is over. But then I found a really cool one, very sweet, intimate studio in Bondi. And oh my Lord, talk about your chosen chapel. That really was it. And someone said to me, Ally, be prepared. The more you do yoga, the more your life is going to change. And that terrified me because I don't like change, despite always trying to instigate change. And that, the relationship ended. I never wanted him back. That's the wonderful thing about a relationship ending when you know it's right. I kind of did a bit of begging. I think I drank a bottle of champagne and phoned him at midday, but he didn't answer. And I found an amazing group of friends, Amy Malloy, who I can say edited my book, my very close, bestest of friends in Bondi. And she had, and has obviously telegraphed this through her work, has gone through her own trauma, and she took me under her wing. She introduced me to these incredible women who've had their past, who know what it's like to have grit, but want to do something really purposeful with it. We went to yoga studios everywhere. We were drinking chai lattes everywhere. Like, it was such a magical time. And I think my parents got it, that it was my time to find out who Ally is without, and also to figure out what the fuck happened with me and my vagina story. Like what trauma had it caused me? Uh, and so I feel like I've all the places of fitting in. I developed the Sisters for Love MRKH Foundation, which subsequently has been rebranded to MRKH Australia. I was on, the telly. I was working with researchers. I was helping women. Every night would be phone calls, fundraising, developing programs for young people around sex and intimacy and mental health. And it just flourished. It was so amazing. Oh, best era of my life.
Do you think that it's very interesting to me that the yoga, which is physicality, unlocked something in you because there had been so much shame attached to your physicality. Do you think that was a key to then this openness that you brought to the world of basically no longer, not even not keeping it a secret, but bellowing it from the rooftops?
Mm-hmm. It was my yoga mat was my therapist. They always say that the asanas, the postures, they're sort of incidental. The strength that you build isn't aesthetic. Being contortionist isn't the purpose of yoga, but great if you get there. I was a self-harmer, as I mentioned before, and I don't really want to go into, of course, how I did it. That's not something I'd want to sort of share out there, but I'm very scarred, let's say, from that. And living
Physically
in Australia in
scarred.
a climate physically scarred, you could look at my arms and it's like an A board for self-harm.
Mm.
In a yoga space, or even in a bikini, I know people are looking at my arms, and I have to really try to not, I don't say want to react, but I need to feel them looking, because I don't want to hide. And maybe that is part of it. I didn't want to physically hide. And I think in that yoga mat, they always say the first thing you might want to do after a really difficult posture, or you can't breathe, or your muscles are aching, is you want to run. And it teaches you not to run. And I remember this really wonderful yoga teacher said that when you're, say, I don't know if people know the chair pose, where you're basically sitting on an
Yes.
invisible chair,
Ouch.
and
Ouch.
your thighs, your thighs are
Mm.
burning. Everything feels weird. Like tuck in your ribs, bend your thing, feet together, and you're like, fuck me. And I just wanted to go, and you just want to run out of that pose. The body doesn't distinguish what you're doing at the time of that particular difficulty. It doesn't know that it's doing a yoga pose any more than it doesn't know that it's going through a injury on a bike, or it doesn't know that
Ah.
it's not going through absolute heartbreak. The body doesn't know what's happening outside. It just knows hard. And if you can teach yourself to go through the hard, not necessarily through pain, but the point where you want to go through that, because when you get outside into the real world, you'll feel that pain again. You'll feel that desire to run, and you don't, because you know you can sustain it. So my yoga studio has seen breakups, breakdowns, meltdowns, but there is something incredibly special that people who go to a yoga studio are not going to get fit per se. It's a byproduct. Most people land in a yoga studio over a gym because they're working some shit out. And there is nothing more spiritually exciting than rubbing shoulders with people who are going through stuff, because it makes your stuff feel less stuffy.
Yes. And you had found that with your girlfriend, Amy. And was it in that period that you decided to explore your infertility / fertility?
I was dating, I think, how old was I? Early 30s, let's say, mid 30s. The thing about Amy and I were that despite having two very different lives in a way, married, she's had her first child. I was very single, very far away from having my first child. There was we always talked about the things that some friends don't want to talk about that could cause a jealousy or a discomfort or an inequality, let's say. Amy and I's skill was always addressing the hard stuff like a normal conversation. And bless Luke, I met Luke on a dating app in Bondi. As,
Right.
you know, oh, yeah,
Bingo.
I don't know, swipe. I thought it would be easy when I came out of a 10-year relationship. I was like, oh, this is easy. That's amazing, man. How hard is this going to be? 3 years later. I really, really liked Luke. But of course, Luke and I realized that we probably weren't in the same relationship. But there is a biological clock and it will chime whether you want to answer it or not. Biology will say to you or ask you to ask the question, do I want a child? I had been hovering around some amazing research and doctors and surgeons for a long time. I was very confident in that space of reproductive medicine or family planning, but I still didn't have my forever after. So I thought, well, I could go and get my eggs frozen. Being in a very well paid job, despite whether it gave me no joy, to be honest, but it did afford me Bondi and afforded me savings because I knew that surrogacy, where opting for somebody else to carry your child, was going to cost me a hell of a lot of money. You're talking sort of north of $50,000, $80,000. And I started the process. We actually went to IVF Australia and Amy was in the waiting room with me and she was pregnant, which is a tragic irony or a beautiful irony, let's say. And I went in and they said, because you've got MRKH, it's going to be trickier. We don't know when your cycle is. We don't know the state of your ovaries. They could be underdeveloped. And I thought, this isn't going to be easy at all. And I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I still was doing it alone. And I did muster up the confidence to tell Luke over spaghetti bolognese one night that I was thinking about having my eggs frozen. And he said, and paused, I think that's a really great idea for you and your future partner. And then I was like, holy fuck, I'm going to have to do this alone. I know.
Oh.
Still didn't leave him though, Kate.
No,
we still
you
don't leave the man.
stayed together. You stayed with him after that. And also you say in the book that he was also sleeping with other people.
Delightful discovery. Bless him. I'd gone away on a conference and I came back and it was the night before my birthday and he looked really twitchy and he said, I've got something to tell you. I slept with someone else and I might have gonorrhea. And I thought, and I think he was nervous because he knew that we couldn't have sex on my birthday. I was nervous because my heart had just been broken. But yeah, didn't leave. He left me actually. Yeah, he did. Which is again, we still talk. I don't have an ex out there apart from maybe one or two that I don't have a conversation with now and again. And I pride myself on that wonderful way of exiting relationships. Maybe I like to keep doors open. I don't know. But he was out the picture and I thought I'm still going to try to do this egg retrieval process. And you know what? I couldn't wrap my head around not having the perfect picture. I thought, I don't want to be doing this alone. I want maybe it's a bit, I don't know, Disney. I wanted
That was the perfect picture for you, was to do it with somebody.
To create a family.
Yes.
I wanted that. And I think I wanted a relationship to be happy more than I wanted a child, if that makes sense. I wanted the whole dynamic. I don't think that my motherly instincts were as strong enough to do it alone. And I couldn't fathom how transactional fertility was when I was handed sort of the FPOS machine for my next load of bloods. And I was like, this feels icky to me. This isn't how I want it to play out. And I went to the IVF clinic for my last time and I didn't tell them it was over, but I phoned my mum, who I used to phone every day in Australia for a good 2 hours. And I said, I don't know what to do. And she's like, Ally, this is one that I can't answer for you. And then I went home that night and I just thought, no, this isn't for me. I put all the files in the bin. I cried profusely. And that was the end. And I did have a big thing. I actually had a surrogate.
Oh, lined up.
Yes. But I said, I think your uterus and your womb is better placed with somebody else for this gift. I wouldn't be taking it for the right reasons.
One of your friends said something so beautiful to you that I had to write it down. The world needs all sorts of mothers: teachers, educators, storytellers and healers. That's what the world needs. And so you decided to step further into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. She was and is an incredible doctor, but also went to the same yoga studio as me. And she could see the pain, and I was heartbroken. I
Mm,
lost a baby, idea of a baby and
mm,
a boyfriend within months of each other. And that's when I really started looking into the word woman and realizing that the world does need all types of women in all types of roles. And my role wasn't to be a biological mother to a child. My role was to, and I don't want to sort of, this sounds very matriarchal, but not to the women of MRKH, but to guide people through what you can do if you don't tick certain boxes. And we have to have holistic versions of womanhood. We have, they always say, don't they, you need to experience all the, the bad stuff in life to have the good stuff in life. And I think the the work that I've done and doing more than ever, actually, right now, I'm so passionate about what it means to dismantle the word woman, especially in the political climate that we're in, especially in the UK, about the
yes.
ruling of what a woman is. Uh, so if you're not necessarily a parent to a child, there will be someone out there who needs mothering. There is a book that someone needs to read, and you could be the storyteller of that, which is another form of mothering.
Mm,
We need the leaders to guide. They said after the pandemic that women were being, well, I want to use this statistic loosely, but the encouragement of having women back in leadership roles with the emotional intelligence that the world was needing after a pandemic was so more needed than your typical version maybe prior.
mm.
And so, yeah, that line is beautiful because it was, I think I just felt a huge surrendering in acceptance.
But your quest for love continued. After that was
Certainly did.
when I was reading your book, I was like, we got to the rom-com bit where you're at a conference and you meet Dr. Greg, and I'm like, this is perfect. Here we go.
I know the power couple of infertility.
Yes,
Trust me, I
yes.
I ignored every red flag that was running towards me because I thought that this has to be, surely a gynecologist, surely who helps women have babies,
Mm,
surely who's passionate about health.
mm.
No,
No,
doesn't make a blind bit of
no.
difference in the world of love.
But you learnt the lesson quicker this time. So amongst his other red flags were like that you didn't go to his house and you wouldn't hear from him for months. But when you saw each other, it was amazing and explosive, and you felt in that time, I think you said, very like a woman.
Yeah,
Mm.
he and I explored sex in ways that I've never explored before. One, he was very, I guess, confident and diverse in that way.
Well, he was a gynecologist, so he knew
He
everything.
knew vagina. Honestly, he did know vaginas.
Yes.
I used to talk to him a lot about. There's some studies reveal, but then there's some studies that won't reveal or that sort of counter that a woman can't lubricate if she hasn't been born with a vaginal canal, which is not true. You or if you haven't got a womb, you can't lubricate. So it was really interesting having these very matter of fact conversations. I used to ask him all sorts of vagina questions about, can it do this? What's female ejaculation? How does that work? And he's like, well, I don't know. Again, I quote him,
Mm.
every woman can do it if they just get out of their heads. And so it was these sort of conversations I was having. It was kind of liberating, and it was glamorous. Like, there's a doctor living near Byron Bay,
Mm,
and
mm.
he's a pioneering surgeon, and I'm attracted to that, but I'm also attracted to people who make me work for it. And he was someone who was not going to be easy to win over, and pretty easy then to leave. But sexually, that was a real, I don't know, turning point. I think, for me to also believe that my body is desirable and I am fanciable and it can explore pleasure, and that's not bad. Pleasure isn't a guilty um,
Mm.
act that we should feel. But then that goes back to my vaginal dilation days, where pain was what I thought was all it was down there. So the quest for love always continues, Kate. That's my next book, no doubt.
Then you go back to the UK, also to be with your mum, who's suffered stroke 8 years previously and then a recurrence of that.
Yes, she had seizures out of nowhere. It was just random. They didn't know why, much like they didn't know why she had a stroke. Her relationship of 25 years was very tumultuous, and my mum has gone through so much crap, like so much of her own crap in her past. Her self-esteem has been affected, her sense of self-worth, her need to apologize every 5 minutes. This is someone who's really tried hard to to feel safe in her world. And I remember looking at her in ICU after the seizures, and I thought, if you wake up, this is when we change your life. I've done my 15 years of running around Australia. I've had my glorified moments. I've had me. I've given that time to me, and now it's your turn. And she did, thank God, wake up and made a great recovery. And then a month later, her relationship tied up and went to an end. But as the book says, I had to choose between keeping our house
Mm.
or having a baby. And I had that money in the bank. And it was the most soul destroying moment, despite knowing that I probably wouldn't have had a child. I always had a little bit of hope and choice in the bank. But we needed a home, and that was the choice I made. So goodbye, Esme.
Esme, you write the most beautiful letter to Esme, your unborn daughter. It was very moving. How was your mum? Because I always think with fertility, it's you, but it's also the generation behind you who often have a hunger for it on your behalf or on their behalf. How was your mum during that period? Selfless or selfish?
Selfless. I have apologized to my parents for not giving them a grandchild. There is no guilt with them. There is no sense of letting down, or I have never been made to feel that I've been inadequate in any way as a child. I think they wish it for me, and I think sometimes my brother has 4 children and I don't have zilch. But also, in the space of a child, I knew that I had to create a lot of magic, and I had to create a life that was really, really exciting and really make it count. And that's what I've done. And I've made my parents incredibly proud. And I think that it's an absolute privilege to love someone that much and to be loved by someone. So there's no obligation in my life when it comes to my parents or the people I have. But how was she in that moment? Well, very sad. But we have our house, and we also have this lovely relationship that's full circle now. And she's very poorly at the moment, which we're working through. But again, it's a privilege to have someone that close that I love. Never a chore.
And you also found you have no trouble finding love, by the way. You found
Just don't know how to hold on to it.
Well, sometimes I think the right one holds on to you. You met a guy called Jack. Once again, I'm like, yay, she's gone back to the UK. She's met a guy called Jack. What happened?
What happened, Kate? Well, this is an interesting junction for me. Jack was a man that had a very unusual type of cancer for a man. He was very funny, witty, creative, he had just started his path on advocacy
Mm-hmm.
to promote, but to make his type of cancer aware in the UK and beyond. It was a friendship first, which I think I've never done before. So that was weird. And I felt very trusting with him, and we would talk about dates that had gone wrong. And then I think that I just saw him one day in a very different light. I think when I met up with him in Oxford, and then I later went to stay with him in the north of England, there was a chemistry that I hadn't experienced before. And I thought, this is the type of man that I want to date. And we did for a while, actually. Well, it's complicated because we have spoken since the book's been released, actually.
As you do.
In fact, the day of my book launch, there was a message from Jack on my phone after quite a long time of not being together. And it was supportive, and he read the book, and he was completely taken aback by how I described the relationship, in the sense of, wow, it really was something special. However, external circumstances just did not align to make it work. And it's tragic. It really is. I don't know whether I have a fear of the future of being, alone and single, and will I meet the one? I don't think that, because you're right. I do know how to hunt them down or be hunted. But I have no idea. And I tell you, this sounds really kind of, I've never been a very in the present type of person. I don't meditate. I mean, I love yoga, but I can't meditate for love nor money. I've never needed just to stay in the moment so much as I do right now, because life has shown me that it doesn't matter how much I try to plan for the future, how much I plan for future feelings, it will not work. And with my mum's health, with so many different sort of cliffhangers with my future and creativity, what am I going to do next? Is there another book in me? I'm just going to trust that I don't need the answers. I don't need the answers today. I just know that I'm incredibly proud of what I've created. And just speaking with you, Kate, today on this incredible podcast is a testament that if I ever have a wobbly day of, am I good enough? Am I doing it right? I need to rewind back to this moment, because it's a wonderful reflection of achievement.
It really is. I mean, we talk to a lot of extraordinary people, often ordinary, extraordinary, or extraordinary people on No Filter. And you certainly are extraordinary. I love your tenet, which I don't even know if it's a formal one for you, but the truth will set you free. And you coming to the truth of yourself, sharing the truth of yourself with others, divesting yourself of shame and guilt, and sharing the journey of your life with others is so valuable. I respect it so much, and I thank you so much for your courage and your advocacy and your beauty.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Kate. And as I always say, the only thing normal in this world is difference. And I would really love to make truth like the next biggest trend, because that's the only way we're going to release the shame in our lives. So thank you so much for those wonderful words.
Thanks, Ally Hensley. I look forward to seeing what Ally does next.